Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Can't tell. Weird. I don't know what's going on. Keeps saying Tulsi Ryan is connecting to audio. She can't seem to get on for some reason. Haribol, anybody there? Well, it looks like I'm on a Zoom conference, but nobody else is. Just odd. Oh, is anyone coming over here?
No, he's turning the truck.
Oh. Hare Krishna. Can anybody hear me?
Haribol, yes, we can hear you. Welcome.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know whether we were connected yet or not.
Yeah, we're connected. We can see you and hear you.
Okay, good. Are there other people online or people in the temple room, or how does this work?
So there are a couple of us online. I think some folks are making their way here, but I don't think our host is here yet.
Yeah, I see. It says Tulsi Rani is trying to connect to audio. So she seems to be having trouble connecting. I don't know. Well, should we go ahead or?
What if it's okay with everyone? Why don't we give it just a couple of minutes? Because I think generally we have either Karuna Gauranga Prabhu or another devotee from the Bhakti Center kind of hosting, and I don't see them.
Okay, yeah,
I
all
don't
right.
know if Tulsi Rani is playing that role or not, but generally it's like the Bhakti Center's official Zoom account is usually the host.
Okay, we'll wait then.
Okay, thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Haribol.
Hare Krishna, Tamohar Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, good to see you, Haribol.
Haribol. Thank you for coming today.
I'm happy to.
Looking forward to it.
Well, I guess if we're waiting for a host, maybe you can entertain us, no?
I would tap dance, but you can't see my feet.
Oh, okay. So Venkata, how are you doing? Yeah.
I'm doing okay, Prabhu.
Are
We're
you?
just kind of hunkered down here in New Jersey, and
Are you still a chaplain?
I am, yeah,
Great.
still at Princeton.
Probably nothing. Are you going to be in session in the fall?
We are kind of sorting it out. The university is taking like a hybrid approach.
Yeah, yeah.
And we're still not clear what exactly that means for us.
Right.
Right now, they're trying to sort out more of the kind of the academic side of the house, and then.
Right. That seems to be the case with most of the universities. They're still figuring it out and different methods. I know my grandson is starting at UF, and I think it's all online courses for the first semester.
Oh wow,
Mostly.
entirely online. Huh?
Yeah.
Kanta Bhakti is also in that sort of no man's land right now. She teaches at NYU,
Uh-huh.
and they're looking at the hybrid model.
Well,
Yeah.
what they figured is class sizes of 30 or more are remote.
Uh-huh.
Class sizes of 16 or under are in person. And class sizes between 16 and 30 are supposed to be this kind of blended thing. But
Yeah.
nobody's really clear on what that is. Because you also have to make it available for everybody who's doing it remotely. Like that's an option. So
Yeah.
it's just that in-between stage is a mess.
Even our public schools, they're offering 3 choices for students to be in class or have an e-school experience, whatever.
Yeah.
But anyway, you all were the, of course, COVID capital epicenter of the world. Now we are.
Yeah.
We've completely taken over your title.
It seemed
A
like
dubious distinction.
it seemed like your governor was intent on taking that title from us.
Yeah.
He's done everything he could, I think, to increase the numbers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he's a political ally of someone from your area.
Let's leave it at that.
Let's leave it at that. This is Srimad Bhagavatam, not a political discourse.
Right.
Okay.
Did everybody
Any
in
of
your
our
family-
officials? I'm sorry.
I was saying everybody in your family is okay though right now?
Oh yeah, everyone's been well. We've had maybe 6 cases here in Alachua. None of them too serious. A couple of them somewhat, but several more younger people, done better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about Gainesville?
Well, yeah, I haven't heard of anything in Gainesville.
Mm-hmm.
Any cases? Well, no, I don't think so. But are we waiting for somebody official to get us started here?
Ben Kutta will probably know the answer to that. He probably, yeah. Go ahead.
So I think we can probably get started, and if folks kind of trickle in, that's fine. I know Gorsharan Prabhu is here, who's kind of a part of the team, and it may very well be that maybe Karuna Gauranga is unable to attend today. So Prabhu, why don't we get started?
Okay.
And generally, what we do, I mean, it's a little bit of a kind of an intimate group, so we can be quite flexible about it.
Right. Right.
And if folks are comfortable sort of unmuting themselves for discussion and conversation, that's always great. I think Karuna just joined us, so maybe I'll turn it over to him to say a few words, and then we can kick it off.
Okay.
Karuna, are you with us?
Hare Krishna Venkatamata Prabhu. Hare Krishna Tamohar Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining us. And
I'm happy to.
thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to welcome you. And if Tulsi Rani Devi, if you could tell us a little more about Tamohar Prabhu I think then we could begin. If that's not already done, sorry, I'm a little late. Or maybe we could begin with the prayers, and as some more devotees join us, after that we could have a small introduction of Tamohar Prabhu, and then we can begin the talk.
Yeah.
I don't think they did. So, do we? What are we doing? You don't normally do Jai Radhamadava, do you?
No, Tamohar Prabhu, not
Yeah,
yet.
it's too hard to do anything responsibly. I know. So, yeah.
If you could just chant regular prayers, and then.
Okay. Mine are very brief. My only issue here is I was trying going on to my screen to bring up the Srimad Bhagavatam verses, and it seems like I lost the Zoom conference when I did that. We'll have to see how that works. But you know, because when I gave a class there about a month ago, just a regular Bhagavatam class in the morning, it seemed like I could go back and forth on my screen. You know.
You should, yeah, you should be able to
just minimize this screen, right, and bring up the Bhagavatam internet screen.
Or if you'd like to share your screen, I think we can be privileged to do that.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's see if I can get the verses up. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnanatimarandisha Gananjana Salakaya Chaksurunnitanena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchakopatubhischa Kripa Sindhu Bebicha Patidano Pavanibhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Bhastai Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamane Namaste Saraswate Gauravani Vitrani Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashchita Desitarane. Okay, well, today we're reading from the fifth canto, chapter 9, about Jada Bharat. And so it's it's not a very long chapter, but it's very, very difficult Sanskrit. It's all prose. And so I'm not really going to read the Sanskrit because of time. I'll read the first verse maybe because I think we should read some Sanskrit, but it's, as I said, it's very long, difficult prose verses. It's not poetic or metered. Okay, I'm going to see if I can minimize this and bring the screen up, if that works. Okay, can you see the screen? The Bhagavatam?
In the Zoom window itself, you'll have to click on the share button, and then it will ask you which screen you want to share.
Okay, now, I seem to have lost, I've lost seeing myself anyway, or anyone else. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. And
all
we
right.
can see you.
And I've kind of
minimize some.
All right, I don't know why I have lost my screen. I can see you, Prabhu, in a corner. That's it. I'm sorry. I just, oh, here we go. Now I'm back. All right, now, so what do? I share. How do I do it? There's a share button. Oh, share screen. Okay, let's see if I can. Okay, where is it? I don't know why it's not here. Okay. Well, that didn't work too well. Here we go. I'm sorry, I had it all up. I don't know why I keep losing everything. Let's see, I'm in chapter 9. Okay.
Tamohar Prabhu, while you're getting it ready, can I just briefly introduce you? Because many of the devotees don't know you. I'm so sorry.
No problem.
So Tamohar Prabhu is a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and him and his wife are very much involved with the Grihastha Vision team, and he is one of the GBCs for, what is it exactly?
Well, I was in the Southeast, but I actually retired last year.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, very nice. No, I was GBC for about 15 years in different areas, mostly in the Southeast. Yeah.
And he's raised 2 or 3 wonderful children.
Three daughters.
3, okay, 3 daughters, and one of them is Jai Shirada, who's also very well known for leading the youth in North America. And anything else you want to throw in there, Tamohar Prabhu? He's always been a great inspiration with his incredible classes.
Well, I don't know about that. And my other daughter, Lalita Saki, I think is your God's sister, Radha Swami disciple. And anyway, yeah, I've done a lot of management work, but not so much of that now. Of course, we're not doing a lot these days because we can't go anywhere or really do anything. But anyway, I'm also a college professor. I do some online teaching still. Fortunately, I'm mostly with the University of Phoenix teaching psychology, and that's probably enough.
Thank you so much for joining us. You can go ahead and get started then.
Okay, I'm going to, let's see if I can, I'm going to have to get, okay, here we go. I'm trying to get this off here. Okay. Okay. Text 1 and 2. Srila Shukadeva Goswami continued, "My dear king, after giving up the body of a deer, Bharat Maharaj took birth in a very pure Brahmin family. There was a Brahmin who belonged to the dynasty of Angira. He was fully qualified with Brahminical qualifications. He could control his mind and senses, and he'd studied the Vedic literatures and other subsidiary literature. He was expert in giving charity, and he was always satisfied, tolerant, very gentle, learned, and non-envious. He was self-realized, engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. He remained always in trance. He had 9 equally qualified sons by his first wife, and by his second wife he begot twins, a brother and a sister, of which the male child was said to be the topmost devotee and foremost of saintly kings, Bharata Maharaj. This then is the story of the birth he took after giving up the body of the deer." So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through about a few verses at a time. I'm going to stop about 4 or 5 times and give some, and at that point I'll probably read the purport of Prabhupada's and then ask some questions, and we'll give some discussion, comments, and have a question or two. So if we can kind of stay with the questions to that particular topic or that part that we're reading about, then I'll try to leave some time at the end for general comments or general questions. Okay? 3. You can see these are very long Sanskrit. Due to his being especially gifted with the Lord's mercy, Bharat Maharaj could remember the incidents of his past life. Although he received the body of a Brahmin, he was very much afraid of his relatives and friends who were not devotees. He was always very cautious of such association because he feared that he would again fall down. Consequently, he manifested himself before the public eye as a madman, dull, blind, and deaf, so that others would not try to talk to him. In this way, he saved himself from bad association. Within, he was always thinking of the lotus feet of the Lord and the chanting of the Lord's glory, which saves one from the bondage of fruit of action. In this way, he saved himself from the onslaught of non-devotee association. Okay, well, one more here. The Brahmin's father's mind was always filled with affection for his son, Jada Bharat Maharaj. Therefore, he was always attached to Jada Bharat. Because Jada Bharat was unfit to enter the Grihastha ashram, he simply executed the purificatory process up to the end of the Brahmachari ashram. Although Jada Bharat was unwilling to accept his father's instruction, the Brahmin nonetheless instructed him in how to keep clean and how to wash, thinking his son should be taught by the father. So here's Srila Prabhupada's purport. Jada Bharat was Bharat Maharaj in the body of a Brahmin, and he outwardly conducted himself as if he were dull, deaf, dumb, and blind. Actually, he was quite alert within. He knew perfectly well the results of fruitive activity and the results of devotional service. In the body of a Brahmin, Maharaj Bharat was completely absorbed in devotional service within. Therefore, it was not at all necessary for him to execute the regular principles of fruitive activity. As confirmed in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Svantishtasya Dharmasya Samsiddhir Haritoshanam. One has to satisfy Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the perfection of the regular principles of fruitive activity. Besides that, it is stated in the Bhagavatam, Dharmakspanushtim pusham vivakshena katasuya natpadayed yadi ritem shrama eva hikebalam. Duties, dharma, executed by men, regardless of occupation, are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the Supreme Lord. 128. These karma kanda activities are required as long as one has not developed Krishna consciousness. If one is developed in Krishna consciousness, there is no need to execute the prior regular principles of karma kanda. Srila Madhavendra Puri said, "Oh, regular principles of karma kanda, please excuse me. I cannot follow all of these regular principles, for I am fully engaged in devotional service." He expressed the desire to sit somewhere beneath a tree and continue chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Consequently, he did not execute all the regular principles. Similarly, Haridas Thakur was born in a Mohammedan family. In the very beginning of his life, he was never trained in the Karma Kanda system. But because he was always chanting the holy name of the Lord, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted him as Namacharya, the authority in chanting the holy name. As Jad Bharat Maharaj was always engaged in devotional service within his mind. Since he executed regular principles continuously for 3 lives, he was not interested in continuing to execute them, although his Brahmin father wanted him to. Okay. Okay. In this purport, we see that Jadabharat was, as a devotee, was very uninterested in the karma kanda rituals. In fact, he was spiritually beyond them. Interestingly, although his father is described as a pure devotee with many, many great qualities as a Vaishnava, it seems as though he trained him primarily in the more ritualistic activities of Brahminical life, including different rituals, purificatory rituals, how to clean himself, how to do different kind of worship and rituals. Jadabharat had really no interest in these things whatsoever. And we know, and probably gives a nice description of how a devotee really is not so interested. Give an example of Madhavendra Puri. In other words, almost can't be bothered with all the different rules, regulations, and rituals that are there in the scriptures. Now, this doesn't mean, of course, the Vaishnava scriptures so much as those which emphasize different types of rules for purificatory rules, sacrifices, ways basically for material gain. Is really what it comes down to. So Jadabharat realized his eternal religious duty with the Lord. He realized his Sanatan Dharma. And our Sanatan Dharma, which is our original connection with Krishna, it is Prabhupada describes Sanatan Dharma as our original occupational duty, or sometimes he describes it as those essential qualities that cannot be separated. He said, just like heat and light cannot be separated by fire, our eternal duty of devotional service to Krishna, that's our Sanatan Dharma. It can't be separated from the true identity of the living entity. Therefore, it's understood that the highest principle is not all of these rules and regulations. In fact, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna clearly says, give up all of these. He says, Sarva Dharma Prityaja Mamekam Sharanamraja, give up all religious duties and simply surrender unto me. And this message is repeated in the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, how pure devotional service is beyond all the ritualistic activities, all the different methods and steps that one might undergo, the different yoga processes. It's beyond karma, it's beyond jnana, and it's beyond yoga. So, and of course, this is described in the Bhagavatam in different places. In the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, this is confirmed. The Yamadutas are speaking, and one of their famous, they say, Vero pranito dharma hya dharmas tad viparya. That which is described in the Vedas constitutes dharma, the religious principle, and the opposite of that is irreligion. And of course, those basic principles is what Jada Bharat's father was trying to teach to him, basic dharmic principles, ways to act in a Brahminical way to act in a religious way, how to be clean, how to observe religious rituals and worship God ultimately. So that is the basic principle of Brahminical culture. However, it is correct. But later, Yamaraj corrects the Yamadutas by saying, Dharmaktu Sakshad Bhagavat Pranitam, that real religious principles are enacted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the idea here is it is really satisfying the Lord with doing what he wants us to do. That's true religion, not any type of rituals or practice or whatever it may be, or ways to gain materially, etc. Prabhupada says in the purport, when challenged by the Vishnudutas to describe the principles of religion, the Yamaduta said, Veda Pranita Dharma, the religious principles are the principles enacted in Vedic literature. They did not know, however, that the Vedic literature contains ritualistic ceremonies that are not transcendental, but are meant to keep peace and order amongst materialistic persons in the material world. Real religious principles are nice trigunya above the three modes of material nature or transcendental. So we have sometimes the principles of religious dharma versus Sanatan Dharma. And real religious duty is that Sanatan Dharma or devotional service to the Lord. Now, this doesn't mean that we neglect our family duties, our community duties. We have so many duties that are there just being in this material body, in this material world. And even a pure devotee does not neglect those things. But we have to be sure that we never neglect our primary duty, which is devotional service to Krishna. So Prabhupada says in Srimad Bhagavatam 126, what is actual dharma, religious duty? And what is actual dharma? So here it is explained. Savai pung sang paro dharma. Para means superior, not this religion, Hindu religion, Muslim, Christian. There's so many religions. That's dharma. That is temporary. But paro dharma means permanent dharma, eternal dharma, or Sanatan Dharma. And just as a last thought on this, another way of looking at this is that so many of these ritualistic activities or brahminical activities are aimed at what they call the purusharthas, the goals of life, and there are four primary goals of life, which Prabhupada talked about a lot: archadharma, kama, moksha, sense gratification, economic development, religiosity, and liberation. Now, this is really the purpose for most of these ritualistic activities. But Prabhupada says, however, above these four kinds of purusharthas, love of Godhead stands supreme. It is called Purushartha Chiromani, the most exalted of all purusharthas. That's from Purport Anchalila 7:24. And then also Adilila, it says, love of God is so exalted that it is considered to be the fifth goal of life, human life, called Krishna Premadana, the treasure of love of God. So we could find probably countless verses, that discuss this point about how important pure devotional service is, how it's above all of these ritualistic activities. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, give up the flowery words of the Vedas. We could, give so many examples like this. So I guess the question I have for you all is, if devotional service and Sanatan Dharma is the real purpose of our lives, why are these other activities mentioned so often? Why does even Bhagavad Gita have several chapters on lower forms of yoga, of karma, and of jnana? So is there a purpose or necessity for religious principles that are in the mode of goodness, brahminical standards and duties? I guess is the first part. And then are devotees above any of these mundane material considerations? Thoughts on that? Is there any purpose for these religious principles? Why are they there? Why are they in the scriptures, since we know they're inferior?
Well, people are all over the map, right? Not everybody's in the same place in their devotional evolution. So
right.
It seems to me that he addresses different prescriptions for different consciousnesses, and then gives us the highest one. And devotees, they are aware of the highest one, and within the community of devotees, still people are all over the map.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an excellent point. In other words, people are in different modes of nature, different levels of advancement. And so Krishna wants to, has given something for everyone, so to speak.
Yeah.
In other words, so that whatever stage one is at, one can at least do that religious principle and hopefully move upward. Other thoughts?
I have kind of an answer to your question, but it sparks actually a question in my mind about how it's applied. I mean, of course, Prabhupada always talks about like the gradual advancement and how, yeah, like Yadunath Prabhu mentioned how not everyone's ready for pure devotional service. And so Krishna wants to create a system so that people can be gradually elevated from wherever they're at. But at the same time, my question is, like, he also mentioned how devotees are all over. There's a whole spectrum of, you know, materialistic devotees to pure unalloyed devotees and everything in between. So I was thinking, and it's something I've thought about before, is for those of us that aren't on the highest level, you know, we've heard Prabhupada talk about Varnashram, of course, but I've always wondered, you know, to what extent do we, those of us that have mixed motives, mixed desires, to what extent do we still do different like pious activities? Because, you know, someone, when we first read Prabhupada's books, we might think, oh, okay, now I'm a devotee. I don't have to do anything except for pure devotional service. You might practice for another few days and realize that you're not capable of doing that. So I'm just wondering, yeah, for the gray area of devotees.
No, that's a really good point. And it's really something I think we all think about a lot. One thing I think it maybe not directly answering what you're saying, but a parallel thought is that devotional service actually begins at the Brahminical point, or from the point of goodness, the mode of goodness. And I just saw there's one purport. Prabhupada says Vedic knowledge gradually brings a conditioned soul to the platform of material goodness. At that stage, one becomes eligible to serve this personality of Godhead and into the transcendental stage of life. So sometimes we think, you know, well, we're above that, we don't have anything to do with it, but that's often just really an excuse to be in the modes of passion and ignorance, you know, saying that we're above the mode of goodness, and we really aren't. So we don't want to create disturbance in society. We want to set example of moral and ethical conduct. All these things which are considered mode of goodness is really the way we should be living, you know, sort of on a day-to-day basis of our, you know, material existence. So, you know, and as far as devotees, you know, there's discussion different places, well, like in Nectar Devotion, about mixed devotional service. There's devotees that are classified sometimes as like Karma Mishra Bhaktas or Jnana Mishra Bhaktas. In other words, they're Bhaktas, but it's mixed with karma and jnana. For most of us, I think it's, you say karma, which basically means our sense desires or whatever, but it's still bhakti. And I think that that's the critical thing, and that devotees remain in the process of bhakti and are becoming purified even if we're not pure now. You know, I mean, Prabhupada give different examples of that, like devotees in the shower. You don't really criticize the devotee because he's still dirty, because he's in the shower. In other words, wherever we're at, whatever our degree of purification or lack of purification, we continue the process and we will become purified. And I think that's one thing that after, you know, I'm trying to think sometimes, you know, if I made an advancement in almost 50 years, and, you know, sometimes I wonder, but I think there are some things that I can say is that you do develop more and more faith in the process. You see the process of Krishna consciousness works. And often to the degree that we don't feel advancement, we don't feel enlivenment, we don't feel whatever happy in our service, it usually comes down to we're not really applying it very well. Our own hearing and chanting and sadhana may not be as strong. And so we don't feel, so much the effects of making advancement. And of course, there's one other factor, which is offenses, which we will get to later as we talk about the dacoits and Kali. But yeah, that's a good point. Did you have any other thoughts on it, Tulsi, Rani?
No, it's mostly just a question I've been thinking.
Yeah.
Me and my husband have been discussing, like so many examples where Prabhupada says that, for a devotee, they don't have to do these different, for example, like Shraddha ceremonies and things like that. But then if you're not a pure devotee and you can't guarantee that you're going to be able to take all of your dependents back to Godhead, or all your family members back to Godhead, then what do you do? Like just little things like that,
My understanding is, if we're not on a platform of pure devotional service, and who of us is, it's not that then we take on other religious activities or other rituals or other things outside of Vaishnavism or Bhakti Yoga. We just apply as much of the process of Bhakti Yoga as possible that we can do,
Tamohar Prabhu, may I just share a couple of thoughts?
Sure.
So first of all, thank you so much for kind of zeroing in on this connection to the gunas. And I was just thinking that, often we can kind of like stack the deck, so to speak, or we can, slant the argument by kind of creating this false dichotomy as if it's like a choice between us acting sattvically or us acting in, in a purely transcendental state. But I think as you alluded to, for most of us, the real question in most of our lives, if we're being honest, is, am I acting sattvically, or am I acting in kind of a mixture of more like rajas and tamas? So I like to think of it also in terms of like, as I am working towards cultivating or moving more and more to a space of kind of pure bhakti, where are my default settings? Are my default settings more in the realm of sattva or more in the realm of rajas and tamas? Not that sattva is in itself, perhaps, not that it's an end unto itself, but that it is like, in one sense, the best possible kind of default setting, if you want to use that language, from which to approach, my spiritual life in a more honest way. And
absolutely. I don't have the quote right with it, but I was seeing, I had it for another class where Prabhupada said exactly that same thing. In other words, that we need to be situated in the mode of goodness as the platform. Well, I guess the one thing I read sort of said that, as the platform for transcendental, situation. Think of, like, for instance, what are our initiation vows? 4 regular principles and chanting 16 rounds, right? Now, the 4 regular principles, are they Bhakti Yoga? Are they devotional service?
No,
they're not really, are they? I've known people who are agnostics who follow the 4 regular principles. Not very many, but So, in other words, but they're mode of goodness. They're the foundation. They keep us from sinful activities, which become hindrances to progressing in Krishna consciousness. So first we have to have the foundation. That's the mode of goodness. That's avoiding sinful activity. Then chanting Hare Krishna, and of course our job is the most important process. Then that becomes the transcendental position, which helps to develop our advancement along with the other practices.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think unless there's something critical, I'll move on because I've got a lot to cover. They've got a whole chapter here. Okay. I'm going to continue reading from, okay. Everybody see the Bhagavatam on the screen? Hopefully.
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. 5. Jadabharat behaved before his father like a fool. Despite his father's am I the right one? Let's see. Yeah. Jadabharat behaved before his father like a fool, despite his father's adequately instructing him in Vedic knowledge. He behaved in that way so his father would know that he was unfit for instruction and would abandon the attempt to instruct him further. He'd behave in a completely opposite way. Although instructed to wash his hands after evacuating, he would wash them before. Nonetheless, his father wanted to give him Vedic instruction during the spring and summer. He tried to teach him the Gayatri mantra, along with Omkara and Vyahriti, but after 4 months, his father still was not successful in instructing him. The Brahmin father of Jadabharat considered his son his heart and soul, and therefore he was very much attached to him. He thought it wise to educate his son properly. Being absorbed in his unsuccessful endeavor, he tried to teach his son the rules and regulations of brahmacharya, including the execution of Vedic vows, cleanliness, study of the Vedas, the regular methods, service to the spiritual master, and methods of offering fire sacrifice. He tried his best to teach his son in this way, but all his endeavors failed. In his heart, he hoped that his son would be a learned scholar, but all his attempts were unsuccessful. Like everyone, the Brahmin was attached to his home, and he had forgotten that someday he would die. Death, however, was not forgetful. At the proper time, death appeared and took him away. And that could be a whole nother class, but I'm going to move on to some other topics. Thereafter, the Brahmin's younger wife, after entrusting her twin children, the boy and the girl, to the elder wife, departed for Patiloka, voluntarily dying with her husband. 8. After the father died, the 9 stepbrothers of Jadabharat, who considered Jadabharat dull and brainless, abandoned the father's attempt to give Jadabharat a complete education. The stepbrothers of Jadabharat were learned in 3 Vedas, the Rig Veda, Samaveda, and Yajur Veda, were very much encouraged Druid activity. The 9 brothers were not at all spiritually enlightened in devotional service to the Lord. Consequently, they could not understand the highly exalted position of Jadabharat. Degraded men are actually no better than animals. The only difference is that animals have 4 legs and such men have only 2. These 2-legged animalistic men used to call Jadabharat mad, dull, deaf, and dumb. They mistreated him, and Jadabharat behaved for them like a madman who was deaf, blind, or dull. He did not protest or try to convince them that he was not so. If others wanted him to do something, he acted according to their desire. Whatever food he could acquire by begging or by wages, and whatever came to his own accord, be it a small quantity, palatable, stale, or tasteless, he would accept and eat. He never ate anything for sense gratification because he was already liberated from the bodily conception, which induces one to accept palatable or unpalatable food. He was full in the transcendental consciousness of devotional service, and therefore he was unaffected by the dualities arising from the bodily misconception. Actually, his body was as strong as a bull's, and his limbs were very muscular. He did not care for winter or summer, wind or rain, and he never covered his body at any time. He lay on the ground and never smeared oil on his body or took a bath. Because his body was dirty, his spiritual effulgence and knowledge were covered, just as a splendor of a valuable gem is covered by dirt. He only wore a dirty loincloth and a sacred thread which was blackish. Understanding that he was born in a Brahmin family, people would call him Brahmabandha and other names. Being thus insulted and neglected by materialistic people, he wandered here and there. Jadabharat used to work only for food. His stepbrothers took advantage of this and engaged him in agricultural field work in exchange for some food. But actually, he did not know how to work very well in the field. He did not know where to spread dirt or where to make the ground level or uneven. His brothers used to give him broken rice, oil cakes, the chaff of rice, worm-eaten grains, and burned grains as stuck to the pot. But gladly accepted all this as if it were nectar. He did not hold any grudges and ate all of this gladly. Okay, here's just a kind of a quick one. We can see from this description how Jadabharat purposely maintained himself like he was deaf, dumb, blind. So basically, he would not become entangled in the material world, as described. After his experience becoming attached to a deer in the former lifetime as Bharat Maharaj, he wanted nothing to do with material world, material relationships, anything like that that would distract him from devotional service. And so, of course, partly it was because of this, but also we can see that many ignorant people, particularly his brothers, who you would think would know from having some more association with him, did not understand his position at all. And we find that devotees are not always recognized by others. This is sometimes the case, that their glories may be hidden from the common vision. So I've just got one real quick question on this section, unless other people have other comments. Can you think of examples from our scriptures of devotees like this, other devotees who were not recognized by others? I think it's a theme we find several places, where a devotee presents himself in such a way that is not really appreciated fully. I'll give you a hint. Think of Gadadhar Pandit in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Who was his spiritual master?
Pundarik Vidyanidhi.
Right, and what was the situation there?
Pundarik Vidyanidhi externally appeared to be very materially opulent and had
Right.
like pond leaves and all kinds of like fancy things all around him.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he appeared to be engaging in all sorts of like sense gratificatory things. And then I forget who it was that brought Gadadhar to meet him. But another devotee brought Gadadhar Pandit to meet Pundarik Vidyanidhi because he was saying what a great devotee he was. And when Gadadhar Pandit got there and saw Pundarik being like practically worshipped in a very lavish way, he was super confused. He was like, I thought I was coming to meet a great devotee. Who is this guy? Like,
Yeah.
And what was it that somebody recited a
Yeah.
verse?
Yeah. Someone recited a verse of the Bhagavatam, and then that revealed his true nature, right?
Was it? I think it was the verse about Putana.
Putana. I think it was the verse about Putana. And yeah, just hearing the wonderful mercy of the Lord, Pundarik Vidyanidhi just was like in ecstasy and showing all ecstatic symptoms. So anyway, Gadadhar Pandit could realize his situation. You know. Anyway, I think he was actually Radharani's father, and in Krishna Leela. So then he became his Gadadhar Pandit's guru. Any other examples like this?
Prabhu, I don't know if this counts, but what about Vamanadev?
Yeah. Well, explain.
Well, that's Krishna himself coming as a little dwarf.
Right.
So
Right.
presenting himself as like not being three steps of land. You know, how much land can 3 steps cover for this
Right.
little person?
Right. So he was very covered in his, and then of course he assumes this gigantic form and steps through the whole universe. I was also thinking Shukadeva Goswami. When Shukadeva first came, he was naked and people were laughing at him, and I was kind of thinking a little bit like Jadabara, just presented himself like that, and but then of course once he sat down in the assembly and began to speak, he revealed himself, for what a incredible, glorious devotee he was. And yeah, I couldn't think of too many. One other one I thought it was Vritrasura. Remember? He was wasn't that Chitra? Who was he in his last lifetime? He was cursed and he had to take birth as a demon, but he actually spoke all these great, wonderful, verses, and turned out to be a great devotee. Although he was
Actually, when you first asked the question, I wasn't thinking of people from the Bhagavatam or the CC. I was actually thinking of modern day devotees.
Oh.
How so many modern day devotees go unnoticed by the public. Like,
That's interesting.
Like a great devotee could be walking down the street wearing regular clothes or even wearing devotional clothes, and people just like don't even notice them.
Yeah.
And how Srila Prabhupada also, when he came to America, went unnoticed by the majority of people. I mean, they might have noticed him because he looked differently, but they didn't realize.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when we tell pastimes of Srila Prabhupada, we all talk like, well, like it was almost like self-apparent. He was self-effulgent, we could see, all of these experiences with him, but obviously not everybody experienced that. Not everybody felt that way. But it's true. Yeah. So, and devotees often aren't really recognized or appreciated. And particularly, you could say in America, where we don't have a culture, where people understand or recognize Vaishnavas or saintly personalities. That would certainly be the case.
Prabhu, even within ISKCON, that tendency is there. Like, unless you're a real big rock star guru almost, people dismiss. I mean, I think there's so many Prabhupada disciples. I mean, you people to some degree know you, right? Because you've been out there a lot. But there's some of your god brothers and god sisters who just sort of done their own thing and they haven't had kind of splashy careers, devotional careers, but they're amazing people, and are sometimes, it seems, dismissed. Like, well, I don't know that person, but little do you know, that person is pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And thus we need to be very careful in our judgments about devotees. Right. Okay, that's just one I wanted to throw in. Let's see. We'll go back to our reading. Okay, now we come to the dacoits. At this time, being desirous of obtaining a son, a leader of the dacoits who came from a Shudra family wanted to worship the goddess Bhadrakali by offering her a sacrifice, a dull man who is considered no better than an animal. The leader of the dacoits captured a man-animal for sacrifice, but he escaped, and the leader ordered his followers to find him. They ran in different directions, but could not find him. Wandering here and there in the middle of the night, covered by dense darkness, they came to a paddy field where they saw the exalted son of the Angira family, Jada Bharat, who was sitting in an elevated place guarding the field against the attacks of deer and wild pigs. The followers and servants of the dacoit chief considered Jada Bharat to possess qualities suitable for a man-animal, and they decided that he was the perfect choice for sacrifice. Their faces bright with happiness, they bound him with ropes and brought him to the temple of goddess Kali. After this, all the thieves, according to their imaginative rituals for killing animalistic men, bathed Jada Bharat, dressed him in new clothes, decorated him with ornaments befitting an animal, smeared his body with scented oils, and decorated him with tilak, sandalwood pulp, and garlands. They fed him sumptuously and then brought him before the goddess Kali, offering her incense, lamps, garlands, parched grain, newly grown twigs, sprouts, fruits, and flowers. In this way, they worshiped the deity before killing the man-animal, and they vibrated songs of prayers and played drums and bugles. Jada Bharat was then made to sit down before the deity. At this time, one of the thieves, acting as the chief priest, was ready to offer the blood of Jada Bharat, whom he imagined to be an animal man, to the goddess Kali to drink as liquor. He therefore took up a very fearsome sword, which was very sharp, consecrated by the mantra of Bhadrakali, and raised it to kill Jada Bharat. All the rogues and thieves had made arrangements for worshiping the goddess Kali, were low-minded men bound by the modes of passion and ignorance. They were overpowered by the desire to become very rich. Therefore, they had the audacity to disobey the injunctions of the Vedas, so much so that they were prepared to kill Jada Bharat, a self-realized soul born in a Brahmin family. Due to their envy, these dacoits brought him before the goddess Kali for sacrifice. Such people who are the best friend of all living entities. Such people are always addicted to envious activities, and therefore they dared to try to kill Jada Bharat. Jada Bharat was the best friend of all living entities. He was no one's enemy, and he was always absorbed in meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He was born of a good Brahmin father, and killing him was forbidden, even though he might have been an enemy or aggressive person. In any case, there was no reason to kill Jada Bharat, and the goddess Kali could not bear this. She could immediately understand that these sinful dacoits were about to kill a great devotee of the Lord. Suddenly, the deity's body burst asunder, and the goddess Kali personally emerged from it and a body burning with intense and intolerable effulgence. Well, there's verses here, and in the purport, Prabhupada talks a lot about animal sacrifice and animal killing. The points, I think, are fairly obvious. And of course, he talks about a human sacrifice. And Prabhupada makes it very clear that nowhere in the Vedas is human sacrifice ever sanctioned. He describes that sometimes animal sacrifice or meat eating is accepted in a very strictly regulated way. You worship a goat to goddess Kali at a certain time of the month. You have to chant certain mantras. The whole idea was to restrict meat eating, not to encourage it. In fact, Prabhupada says that one of the mantras that you chant says to the animal that I am going to eat you in this lifetime, in a future lifetime, you will be able to kill and eat me. Now, if someone were intelligent, you might wonder, is this really a good thing to do? In other words, I'm going to get eaten myself by this animal that I'm killing because of the laws of karma. So the whole idea was that these, and of course, we all know also the scripture, just like the Puranas, there are 18 Puranas, and Prabhupada describes that 6 are from the mode of ignorance, 6 for people in the mode of passion, 6 for those in the mode of goodness. Of course, the Bhagavat-Purana is called the spotless or Amala Purana, which is totally transcendental. But the idea is that there are those scriptures for people in mode of ignorance, to give them a gradual way of elevating and also to regulate sinful activity so society is not disrupted. But nowhere is the idea of a human sacrifice ever there. And Prabhupada says at one point that one of the verses says that they offered the rituals by their own devices or by their own concoction, more or less. In other words, these were just made-up rituals, made-up activities that this group of very, very low-class dacoits, created, thinking that they were going to gain some benefit from goddess Bhadrakali. Anybody want to mention anything? I mean, if there's any points on it, otherwise I'll go on. All right. I mean, I think we kind of get it. Human sacrifice is bad. Shouldn't do it. Okay. Okay. But and as we'll see, though, it's even beyond that. The fact that they had chosen someone like Jada Bharat, who was a pure devotee of the Lord, made this even more heinous, made this, really, really an offensive thing. So a couple more verses here. Okay, here's the good part, when they get what's coming to them. See, there is justice in the world. Intolerant of the offenses committed, the infuriated goddess Kali flashed her eyes and displayed her fierce curved teeth. Her reddish eyes glowed and she displayed her fearsome features. She assumed a frightening body, and as if she were prepared to destroy the entire creation. Leaping violently from the altar, she immediately decapitated all the rogues and thieves with the very sword with which they intended to kill Jada Bharat. She then began to drink the hot blood that flowed from the necks of the beheaded rogues and thieves, as if this blood were liquor. Indeed, she drank this intoxicant with her associates, who were witches and female demons. Being intoxicated with this blood, they all began to sing very loudly and dance as though prepared to annihilate the entire universe. At the same time, they began to play with the heads of the rogues and thieves, tossing them about as if they were balls. Okay. When an envious person commits an offense before a great personality, he is always punished in the way mentioned above. Well, this brings us to an extremely important point. Obviously, the dacoits were not just criminal, but they were spiritual offenders to great devotee. And that's the point that's made here. And that's really, if this person had been somebody else, perhaps Kali wouldn't have taken such an extreme action, but because she could not tolerate. Of course, goddess Kali is a devotee of Krishna, and she's performing her more or less thankless service of keeping the living entities captivated in this material world. And she sort of runs the material energy in her different forms. So, but she could not bear such a great offense to a devotee like Jadabhara. This was too much. In fact, I'm sure she was probably used to all sorts of, offerings of all kinds to her from people in the mode of ignorance, but this was really beyond. This was too much. And so therefore she broke out of the deity. In one of the purports, Prabhupada quotes Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur saying that actually Jadabhara's effulgence was so strong that he broke apart the deity. Anyway, so however that was, they came to their end. And the point was that one who commits offenses to devotees will be punished. And there will be some suffering to those who defame or offend Vaishnavas. There's, of course, one of our dramatic stories we have in the Krishna book in the 10th canto is King Riga. Now here's a case where King Riga was simply mistaken. He made a mistake with the cows that wandered, but still, this was an offense to a Brahmin, and therefore he had to take this birth as a lizard later. In Bhagavatam 10:64-30, this is in that story, it says, poison kills only the person who ingests it, and an ordinary fire may be extinguished with water, but the fire generated from the kindling wood of a Brahmin's property burns the thief's entire family down to the root. Pretty strong. In the purport, it says, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti compares the fire igniting to stealing a Brahmin's property to the fire blazing with the cavity of an old tree. It cannot be put out by the water of numerous rainfalls. Similarly, the fire ignited by stealing a Brahmin's property is most deadly and should be avoided at all costs. Now, of course, this is only one example of the offense, stealing a Brahmin's property. There are many possible types of offenses, and of course, they must be avoided. In fact, one of the biggest hindrances to our spiritual life is committing offenses to devotees. And we know that the first offense against the holy name is to blaspheme the devotees who dedicate their lives for propagating the holy name of the Lord. And Prabhupada has described this first offense as the mad elephant offense. This is just to blaspheme or unfairly criticize a devotee, what to speak of try to offer him as a human sacrifice. So you can imagine, I mean, that's like sort of on the top end scale of offenses. So, I mean, even just to blaspheme a pure devotee is considered to be a great offense. It's interesting how it's called a mad elephant offense. I actually did see a YouTube video of a mad elephant once in a garden. It's as it's described, and it was just tearing the place apart, uprooting the trees. I mean, just destroyed the entire thing. And so it actually happens. And that's the comparison, the analogy, of course, is destroying the garden where the creeper, the vine of our devotional service, the Bhakti Lata Bij, is growing. So just as you get a mad elephant, you got a little creeper there, a little vine smash, immediately it's destroyed. So in the same way, these offenses can destroy that creeper of our devotional service. I've always found it interesting that so many of these examples that are given in the Bhagavatam that Prabhupada quoted a lot, they're all true. Of course they're true. They're absolute scripture. But I mean, you'll actually can see them. Remember, like the one of when the story in the 6th canto, Prayasthita and Parikshit Maharaj says, this whole idea of atonement, he says, doesn't work. He says, it's just like, it's the sin and confess idea. It's just like the elephant. He takes a bath in the water and immediately rolls, in the dirt. It's the same way people ask for forgiveness, and then they immediately commit sins again. I was in a zoo once and I was watching the elephants. And they had a big area, where they had a lake and all kinds of things for the elephants. It was a nice area for them, I guess. Anyway, elephant went in, got all wet, got himself completely bathed, clean, immediately rolled in the dirt, just as the scripture said, and got himself. Now, I think there's some reason they do it. Some, that's good for them to keep covered with the sand or whatever. But that's the idea. So all these things happen. They're there. Anyway, the mad elephant offense is a very good, vivid example of what can happen to our devotional service if we do commit offenses. Now, interestingly, there's 10 offenses, of course, to the holy name. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says in his commentaries to in the 6th canto in those first 3 chapters, he says that most of the 10 offenses, which are nam aparad, offenses against the holy name, they will be counteracted simply by continually chanting. If you continue to chant, you will basically negate most of these offenses. For instance, if you are thinking that the names of Brahma and Shiva are equal to the names of Vishnu, which I don't know if any of us does, we never even knew about them before we became devotees much, but in other words, eventually your heart, you'll understand. Eventually realization will come, oh, I'm chanting Krishna's name, Krishna is probably supreme, not Shiva or not Brahma. In other words, those things will take care of themselves in due course of time. But Vishwanath says there are two offenses that if you commit, you'll have to suffer some reaction for them. And those two offenses are one, offending or blaspheming the devotees, the first offense, and then the seventh offense, committing sin on the strength of chanting. So those two are very, very powerful and very important amongst all the offenses that we have to be careful about. And so that's why particularly this idea of offending a devotee is important, because there can be some reaction. And different places, Krishna has talked about this, is that even if the devotee is not offended, Krishna may be offended on behalf of the devotee. Just like we had the example of Durvasa and Ambarish, right? Durvasa comes to kill, basically, Ambarish. Ambarish is very tolerant. He's a pure devotee. He doesn't become offended. Krishna becomes offended for him, takes up his Sudarshan chakra, and goes after him. And then he's told, there's nothing you can do but go to the devotee and beg their forgiveness to Ambarish. So that's kind of how it works. I'm going to talk a little bit about offenses, and I'm going to quote a little bit from one of the sources that I think has such a nice description is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's Madhurya Kandambini. He has a whole chapter about offenses. And a lot of Prabhupada says the same things. It's just kind of all condensed there. So first of all, talks about the effect of offenses. What is it that offenses actually do? Vishwanath says, in spite of the fact that Bhava or Rati has appeared, the obstacles have not completely dissipated. There still remains a trace of some serious aparad, because the effects of aparad are strong and long-lasting. And in this condition, with even a trace of aparad that generates suffering, sadhya bhakti, or the perfectional state, cannot appear. So basically, the biggest issue is that offenses to devotees impede our advancement in devotional service. In other words, it prevents us from reaching those really higher stages of devotional service, even if there seems to be some advancement. So that's, we could say so many other things, but basically, we will have difficulty in our own spiritual life, if we do commit offenses against devotees. What do we do about it? Remedies. Vishwanath, of course, talks about that. There's actually three steps. Okay? We often talk about getting forgiveness, but what happens if that doesn't work? Okay, here's the plan. If one even accidentally commits this offense against a Vaishnava, he must bitterly repent of his low behavior. Just as poison is counteracted by poison, similarly, the offender, having set aflame his spiritual life with blasphemy, must be purified in the fire of contrition. The offender must go and fall at the feet of the devotee he reviled and beg forgiveness until he is again able to please that Vaishnava. So, what do you do if that doesn't work? Yet, if for some reason he is unable to appease the devotee, then the offender must continue to serve him for many days in a way that will impress and satisfy him. In case the offense is of such serious nature, the Vaishnava's ire remains unpacified, then the offender must strongly condemn his own abominable action, think how shameful I blaspheme a devotee. With a heavy heart, the operati must then take complete shelter of the holy name and chant incessantly, knowing that is his only hope. So if nothing else works in sort of mitigating the offense or getting forgiveness from the person that you committed offense, then you have to at least just take shelter of the holy name and chant and hope for forgiveness in the future. So our scriptures make a very strong point of it, and I know sometimes as devotees, and I even wanted to say, I always thought, well, we're talking about Vaishnava Aparad, we're talking about the Guru, we're talking about people like, great devotees that we know of, that there was some offender to. So the question is, who does this refer to? Who is a Vaishnava devotee? Do we only need to avoid offending pure devotees to the Guru, etc.? Thoughts on that? Go ahead. Oh, Kendra? Or, yeah. I'm sorry, Kendra, why did I say Kendra? Yadunath.
You could Kendra.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Okay, maybe it was the, maybe I mixed up, put Ekanta and Yana together. And anyway, whatever. Okay.
Anyway, he's a comedian. What was the question? Oh, anyone. Anyone who's chanting Hare Krishna, anyone who's on the path of Bhakti Yoga.
Exactly. And that point is made there. In several places in Bhakti-Rasamrita Sindhu and other places, they say, who is a Vaishnava? Vaishnava is one who's chanting Hare Krishna. It doesn't give a big qualification. It has to be an Uttama Adhikari, Jagat Guru, and that if you're chanting Hare Krishna, you're a Vaishnava, and therefore we have to be careful. In fact, in the Madhurya Kandamini, Vishwanath refutes this less advanced devotee argument. He poses that. He says, well, some devotees think, well, if a devotee's not very advanced, it's not so serious. But he says that we must avoid offenses to all devotees, so that's there. Now, one thing that occurs to me is, there's an expression, familiarity breeds contempt, right? So it seems like the more familiar we are, maybe the less seriously we take it. So we also, I think, have to be careful with our families, with our friends, people we may be very familiar with. I, of course, did, counsel devotees, and especially couples for many, many years. And I don't think a husband and wife, I think rarely do I see that they actually think that if I'm yelling at my spouse and I'm whatever, that I'm actually offending a devotee. It's like somehow they don't count, right? They're exempt from, they understand it philosophically, but my husband or wife doesn't count. They're just who they are, So I don't know if you get a little break for that or not, but I mean, if that person is a Vaishnava, then we also have to remember that, that our duty is to serve that person and not to commit offenses to them. Now, I'm sure that, Prabhupada also said our argument between husband and wife shouldn't be taken so seriously. So it's not like we should become all offended, anytime there's some disagreement, because that's going to happen, but still it's something to remember, to give respect and love and honor to all the Vaishnavas, no matter how close we are to them. Yeah. So I guess the question I have, and we don't have to bare our souls or anything. I mean, this is like not group therapy, is Bhagavatam. But can you think of any examples in your own life or observed in others perhaps, where there have been offenses and what effect that might have? And then I guess the next question or corollary would be that how have devotees dealt with these offenses? If we've seen them either positively or negatively, either as one being offended or one giving offense. And in other words, does this mean anything to us? Do we see this happening? Have we had it happen to us? Or have we maybe even accidentally caused offense? And how do we deal with it? I'll give people a minute. This is kind of when you got to think about it a little bit.
I actually have a story I can share briefly.
Okay.
When I was very new to Krishna consciousness, there was a devotee that I became really close with, and they did something that made me get really, really mad at them. I don't want to elaborate, but I was really, really mad at them. And I think I had probably just been chanting 16 rounds for like a few months. And I definitely said some things to that devotee that were definitely offensive. And even without knowing about the 10 offenses to the holy names, I immediately observed after that incident that for days, no matter how hard I tried, my chanting, just like it was empty. I felt nothing from the chanting. And somehow Paramatma in the heart, just like I knew that it was because I had treated that devotee I had, reciprocated in a negative way with a devotee that I felt had reciprocated with me negatively. And only after, I was probably like a week later, that I like tried to sit down with them and try to talk things out, and did a lot of crying, and said we were sorry and everything. And then immediately after that, I was chanting, and I was like, oh, thank God, I haven't lost that connection, with the holy names. It's a very powerful experience for me. So I just wanted to share that.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that. I mean, it's sometimes just, these things are personal. And so, I mean, that's very much appreciated. And it was a great example. I mean, not only because you had some realization that you may have done something which wasn't good or appropriate. And there are two or three things that were particularly good about it. First of all, you actually experienced the diminishment of your spiritual life, or your enthusiasm, or your advancement, or whatever. And so recognizing that, then you did the right thing. You rectified it, went to the person, and then you saw the effects of that. So that was a great example. Thank you. Anybody else? I'm going to just skip. This is one was kind of a interesting one. When one of my, I'll see if I can do this without mentioning names. Tulsi Rani might know who I'm talking about, since she was down our way previously in Florida. My daughter was getting, I don't know if it was first or second initiation from Radhanath Swami, and they're doing the fire yajna outside. And some devotee, I think he was a little bit mentally ill at the time. He's doing much better now, but he was very disruptive. He's actually disrupting the fire yajna. And it was just like, I mean, who does that? This is a devotee. He was born in the movement, Anyway, it was really obnoxious. And I think my daughter's husband and myself, we were about ready to do the guy in, take some strong action. But anyway, it worked out okay. And he was just sort of goofing. I don't know why. But anyway, about a year or two later, I was up, I'll just say farther north, where I was GBC. And his father came up to me, who was a Prabhupada disciple, a god brother of mine. And he, hold one second. All right, I had a knock on the door there. His father came up, and I didn't really know him very well. I kind of know who he was. And he offers his dantabats to me. And I think, what is going on? So I offer my face and sits back, and he profusely apologized on behalf of his son, for his son, which he felt was very offensive, to all of us, and to Radhanath Swami and everyone else, which it was kind of, and I realized, and it's like, I was really irritated at this guy, the young guy, I mean, I really was. I was holding it, and after that, I gave it up much. I thought, he has his problems. Let's try to help him. And he actually ended up being a nice devotee around the temple, a couple of years later. So, but it is powerful. There's a great effect in doing that,
Prabhu, a story comes to mind, but it's not anything I saw. It's a story that I heard someone tell me about. I've heard it a couple of times from different sources, so I kind of believe it. I'm shaky on the details. I don't know if you've heard it. It's after the attack on New Vrindavan, the motorcycle gang came in.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard it said that years later, devotees were in that area somewhere, and they came across somebody who was like, I think in a wheelchair. I may be getting some of these details, but you'll get the gestalt of it. Somebody was in a wheelchair. They saw these devotees in their garb and everything, and they said, "You guys are Hare Krishnas, right?" And he offered them his respects, and he said that he was one of those people who came in and destroyed property there, and he felt convinced that, I forget what happened to him, but all these tragedies happened to him. He ended up in a wheelchair, very disabled. And he was convinced that it was because he desecrated the temple property and his involvement in that.
I never heard that. It's a good story. You know, whether it's true or not, it's a great story. No,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll have to check that out. It's interesting.
And something I have seen, and I don't know what offenses were involved or anything, but I'm just trying to think now if it's okay to use a name. I think it is because that's true. Well, yeah, okay, so there was a devotee who had dropped out of ISKCON for a long time, had a fall down, and I don't know the particulars in terms of his relationship with other devotees, but I know that several years ago when he started coming around again, it seemed like whenever he saw his god siblings, let me tell you what I saw. I saw him drop dandavats on the streets of New York when His Holiness Bhakti Swami came out of a car. And it was the first time they'd seen each other in years. And he just prostrated obeisances right there, asking apologies. They embraced. I saw him do this also after a class at the Bhakti Center. Ravindra Sri Prabhu had given a class. He approached Ravindra Sri Prabhu afterwards, dandavats, asking for forgiveness. Very powerful and moving experience.
Thank you. Okay, anything else? I think we've got one verse to finish. Oh, cool.
I actually have a question, if that's okay.
Sure.
There's actually a senior devotee that I feel like I'm pretty sure I've offended. And you know how it's recommended that you approach them and beg for forgiveness and fall at their feet and yada, yada, yada. But I've actually been a bit afraid to approach them because, the offensive things that I said were in response to feeling like they had treated me harshly. And so I guess there's this fear of, again, being treated harshly. And at the same time, there's a fear of, if I approach that devotee and say, I'm so sorry I've offended you, they're going to be like, in what way? What have you done? And then I feel like I have to explain, oh, well, I said this and this and this about you. It's just going to increase the offense and make that devotee actually feel more offended and be aware. So I guess what would you suggest in that situation?
I don't, I have to say, I've been on the other end of that, where I've had once or twice somebody came up to me about that they offended me and something they said, and sometimes I couldn't even remember it, So I mean, that's like might happen to you, and that's something that wouldn't be very nice. I felt bad that I didn't remember that I was supposed to be offended, but usually it was more a matter of I wasn't really offended. I just thought it was kind of like normal give and take. I think it's always best to talk it out. I gave the example a little bit in very vaguely in Bhakti Swami's memorial service that we had a couple weeks ago here in Alachua. And of course, I knew Bhakti Swami fairly well through the GBC for many years. And because of the nature of the GBC, there's a lot of management stuff that happens. And especially most of us are God brothers, we don't always agree. And so it's like, I remember there were a couple of things I had some disagreements with Maharaj about. And afterwards, once we had something that he came up to me and had lunch with me, and he was so concerned that we were okay, that there wasn't anything personal. Understood. I mean, he was such a, I was going to say lovely person. That sounds dumb, but you know what I mean. He was just so sweet and so advanced and there never was. And I said, Maharaj, that's business. That has nothing to do with, the spiritual relationship is so important, and that's what's there. And, we always kept that. And I felt, I'm sorry, I'm getting diverging a little bit, but this meant it hit me a lot, Bhakti Swami's passing, more than many that I've experienced. And he was just here in Alachua just a little while ago, maybe 4 months ago or something, just kind of before everything got shut down. And, you know, I had a really nice lunch with him. I got invited a couple times to lunch, and, you know, and we were really having a nice relationship and talking about how, you know, that when we weren't happening with GBC business, how nice it was just to get to know each other better and all that like that. And I really felt that way. So I really felt a real loss there in a relationship that was there. And so, and this is a long way around my answering the question, I guess, is that I think a lot of times it is better just to try to talk about it, just to try to say, I just wondered, I might have said something, you know, is everything okay there? Or I didn't want to, you know, the thing is, what's the worst thing that can happen? Worst thing that can happen, you said you might get a harsh response again, but the thing is, that's kind of on them, you know, that's on them. You know, if they're, because I would say giving you a harsh response when you're trying to sincerely make amends, that's not a really nice, that's not a really good Vaishnava response. And so that's kind of their problem. And you've done the right thing. You know, you've done what you had to do, you know, and I think that's all you can do. It's, you know, there's no guarantee you're always going to get the response that you want from people. I mean, I've been involved in counseling and mediations, things like that, where you think you're going to bring people together and it doesn't always happen, you know. Yeah.
I guess the fear is that I'm just going to make more offenses by actually revealing to that devotee the offenses that I've made to them.
Yeah, well,
Like,
that wouldn't necessarily be good. Of course, you could say it in such a way like, I may have said something like this, which of course I regret, and I don't know. You know how to do it. You're a good speaker, you know. But yeah. Or the other thing is, you know, perhaps it's not even very important to this person, you know, and maybe just let it go. It's kind of up to you. You gotta, sometimes you just gotta use your intelligence. You know, basically the best thing to do in these situations is just pray on it, you know, chant and pray and look for guidance within. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. You know, I had a whole other, another huge topic and we're not gonna have time for it, but I think I should at least read the last verse. And where are we? Okay. The last verse is, Shukadeva Goswami then said to Maharaj Pariksit, O Vishnu Datta, those who already know that the soul is separate from the body, who are liberated from the invincible knot in the heart, who are always engaged in welfare activity for all living entities, and never contemplate harming anyone, are always protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who carries his disc, the Sudarshan Chakra, and acts as supreme time to kill the demons and protect his devotees. The devotees always take shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord. Therefore, at all times, even if threatened by decapitation, they remain unagitated. For them, that is not at all wonderful. So you can just imagine what a wonderful class and purport I had for that one. No, it's actually a really important point, and it's one I was kind of looking forward to talking about. I'll see if I can say anything in 2 minutes here. Anyway, the goal of devotional service is really to taking complete surrender of Krishna, and that requires faith. And Prabhupada said faith means unflinching trust in something sublime. That's from Bhagavad Gita 241 purport. I've always remembered that since I was a new devotee. I always thought that was such a beautiful, you know, way of putting it. Unflinching trust in something sublime. So sublime means, of course, something that's not readily seen, readily apparent, not obvious. And much of Krishna consciousness is not so readily apparent. We have faith in Krishna. Most of us don't really see Krishna face to face. You know, we have a certain amount of faith, but that faith, of course, is also based on realization and experience, which we gain over time with Krishna consciousness. So the devotee becomes reliant on Krishna. And of course, it's described there's 6 divisions of surrender. And one of those 6 is the conviction that Krishna will give all protection, the acceptance of the Lord as one's guardian or master, knowing Krishna as a maintainer, and full self-surrender. Those are there. Those are sort of marks of our advancement, of our surrender, that we feel that faith in Krishna's protection. And of course, that protection, may be material. We have the great examples of Prahlad Maharaj, who could not be killed, basically, by Hiranyakasipu, because Krishna protected him over and over again. But my last comment here is that our greatest protection is spiritual protection. Krishna doesn't necessarily guarantee he's always going to save our physical body. Obviously, we're in the material world. How many we've seen devotees pass away. We've seen devotees killed in accidents. It may happen. That's being here in this material world. But he does always try to help us advance in Krishna consciousness. So I'm just going to end with, I have a lot more I could say, but I'm going to end with one verse I've always really liked. This is from Madhya Lila 22, 39 through 42. Krishna says, if one engages in my transcendental loving service, at the same time wants the opulence of material enjoyment, he is very, very foolish. Indeed, he is just like a person who gives up ambrosia to drink poison. Since I'm very intelligent, why should I give this fool material prosperity? Instead, I shall induce him to take the nectar of the shelter of my lotus feet and make him forget illusory material enjoyment. Whenever Krishna is requested to fulfill one's desire, he undoubtedly does so, but he does not ward anything which, after being enjoyed, will cause one to petition him again and again to fulfill further desires. When one has other desires, but to engage in the Lord's service, Krishna forcibly gives one shelter at his lotus feet, where one will forget all their desires. When someone engages in Lord Krishna's devotional service for the satisfaction of the senses and instead acquires a taste for serving Krishna, he gives up those material desires. So Krishna is always working in our best interests, even if we do not see it. And so the devotee understands that everything is coming from the Lord and has a purpose. And Krishna working in our best interest, the devotee sees that any good and bad conditions, suffering, happiness, whatever, are special mercy from the Lord. They're actually learning opportunities. Krishna gives us opportunities to surrender, opportunities to grow, opportunities to increase our faith, opportunities to learn more and more about how to serve him. So, of course, a whole other topic about why do devotees sometimes experience suffering. I did a seminar on that for the ILS in Mayapur a few years ago, and it's a very, very in-depth topic. But the fact is that Krishna is always taking care of us. He's looking out for our interests as devotees. I'll give you one quick analogy. What's the difference between ordinary karma and devotees experiencing some suffering or unhappiness? Of course, we know that a devotee who has taken shelter of Krishna and is under the orders, instructions of spiritual masters, no longer under ordinary karma. An analogy I thought of is it's like taking a ball and bouncing it off the wall. If I bounce the ball off the wall, it's going to come back, and it's very strict by the laws of nature. It comes in at a certain angle, it's going to come back at a certain angle. That's all regulated. That's karma. If I throw the ball and someone catches it and throws it back to me, it looks the same, but it's different. One is mechanical, laws of karma. The other is Krishna directly handing it back to me. So that's for the devotee. Sometimes there may appear to be suffering or distress, but it's thank you, but it's but it's all the personal workings of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his relationship with us and his helping us to become more Krishna conscious. Okay, we're almost out of time. Unless someone has any comment or question, anything quickly.
Thank you, Prabhu. That was wonderful. I wish more devotees were here to have heard it.
Well, thank you. You're a great audience, and I appreciated all your input and comments.
Thank you.
Okay. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you so much for joining us, Tamohar Prabhu, and spending some time of your afternoon. It was very valuable for all of us to hear from you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much,
Appreciate it.
Tamohar Prabhu.
Well, thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Take care, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Hare Bol.